We have a couple more people walking in, and we will, a few more, but we are going to get started in just a moment. Wow, yeah, that was good. That was effective. All right. Hey, everybody. Very glad that you are all here. Very excited to talk about this journey and to share my experience with you. I was thinking about introductions today, and that screen came to mind, the screen before you watch a documentary where they're like, listen, everybody has their opinions and don't sue us for it. What people say, people are crazy. You can't, like that kind of screen. But all that to say, this is my experience, and that's what I'm trying to be faithful to. And I hope that that is meaningful to other people, and that you can take things from that that are important or interesting or spark something for you and your imagination. And I would, maybe we can have more conversations later. Plant seeds, all of that. I have hopes for this being important, or I wouldn't be here. At the same time, bear with me. This is my experience. If you have really different thoughts or opinions, I would be happy to talk to you about that, and know that I'm still on my own journey with processing this journey. So I'm not an expert in the Camino. I just walked it. So on that note, I'm going to start with a prayer that somebody gave me. And this became actually one of the primary liturgies of my time on the Camino. And I don't know that I read it or prayed it every day, but pretty close to. So I'm going to read this prayer and then open our time. And this is the welcoming prayer by Father Thomas Keating. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I welcome everything that comes to me today, because I know it's for my healing. I welcome all thoughts, feelings, emotions, persons, situations, conditions. I let go of my desire for power and control. I let go of my desire for affection, esteem, approval, and pleasure. I let go of my desire for survival and security. I let go of my desire to change any situation, condition, person, or myself. I open to the love and presence of God and God's action within. Amen. Father, thank you for tonight. Thank you for this journey and all the many ways that your church and your children have sought you and built forms to do so. May your wisdom come to us, and may you always bring us to yourself, even tonight. Amen. All right. Quick overview with what I'm hoping to do tonight. This, in some sense, is just, why don't we get around and look at travel pics anymore, right? Why don't we get around and be like, this is when I was on the boat, and this is the fish that I caught, and I loved it, and it's the biggest fish I ever caught. And those sorts of things that apparently all the movies tell my generation happened all the time a while ago don't seem to happen anymore. I'm bummed about that. So that is part of what's going on tonight, and I hope that you're down for that. And additionally, I want to talk about my experience to actually communicate one view of what the Camino is, because I had some friends who went on the Camino, and that I just didn't know that it existed in the world. I didn't know that there was such a thing as a pilgrimage in Spain, and what that even meant, and that I could do it today. So I'm hoping to give a little bit of form around what is the Camino, to make it more real to you in case you ever may do it, to nudge you in that direction. And then, additionally, this seems like a good crowd to talk about my experiences with the spiritual discipline of a pilgrimage and my wrestlings with what does that even mean today? What does a pilgrimage mean in a modern or postmodern context? What could something ancient like that speak to today, and some of the ins and outs of wrestling with that? So I hope that also could be somewhat informative. All right, this cool painting, this is a representation of an angel of God wrestling with Israel, right? And this is a painting in Bayonne, France, and it was right before I started my journey. And I would actually think about it quite a bit during the journey when I was feeling very frustrated for one reason or another, whether that was bodily or physically or emotionally or spiritually, and then whether it was this or something like it, but this became a symbol of like, oh right, I'm just doing what the people of God do. They wrestle with God, and that is what Israel is named. So that's where we're gonna start. This is just the screenshot of the welcoming prayer that I had on my phone that I just read a second ago, and it was beautiful and meaningful to me. This is the obligatory I'm about to travel photo. I'm in the airport. I have all the things on my back that I will have this entire time, and I don't know what will happen to me. I've never gone on a trip like this, and this is what I look like before whatever happens to me happens to me. This is Saint Jean. This is the first city that you come to. I was in France for a couple of days before I started, and I was talking to this sweet older woman who had lived in LA for a while, and I told her what I was doing. She was helping me order a cheese sandwich or something, and she was like, oh, so you're hiking just the very end. And I was like, no, like I'm hiking 500 miles. I'm doing the whole Spanish section. And she was like, yeah, but you're not starting in France like real pilgrims do. And I was like, okay. But this is where a lot of people begin. And this is right in the Pyrenees Mountains. This is right before you get into Spain. So let me jump back to here. Why did I even go on this trip? I told you that somebody told me about it. I told you that it was fascinating to my mind that this existed in the world and I wanted to try it, but why? Why do something like this? Well, I was actually planning to do this trip 2 years prior, and I was packed and ready. I decided to go because I had so many things end in my life that year. I had left a job that I'd been at for a long time. I'd left a learning community at the MSM here. I'd wrapped up my time there. I had a long-term relationship that I was in ended. And these different big categories of meaning and community and purpose all were now non-existent to me. And so I thought, what is the value? Is there any positive to being totally disconnected? Is there any way to spin that's not just a negative, not just a lack? And I thought about freedom and adventure. And I actually think that this is similar to a lot of people that do go on the Camino. I'll talk about people that I meet, but almost everybody there is working through something. They're hoping to process something that's happened to them, a season that they're in at the moment. And I have this delight and peace and tucked away in this one part of my heart, knowing that even if my life falls apart 3 different 12 different times over the next 30 years, like this, I can always walk the Camino again, you know? I can always go and do that again, and I'll meet many people that have just gone through something and are there to try and show up and be present and heal and reconnect, and that will be a good place to do that. So some of the people that I did meet, this is gorgeous. This is Roncesvalles. This is a really old monastery, and that white structure to the right is where we were staying. So rooms with hundreds and hundreds of beds. And that is, man, that's really starting out your albergue experience very strong. Albergues are just their pilgrim hostels. That's what they are. But just such a beautiful start to everything there. Yeah, it's pretty. It is pretty. That's pretty much what this photo is there, to just let you all know it's an attractive place. The land is good. That's my friend that I met the first day. That's Martin from Denmark. And we met because we in the monastery, our bunks were next to each other, and he needed a phone charger. And he needed a phone charger because all of his luggage had been lost on the way, and so everything he had, even to make it through that first day, was just borrowed from other people and just the goodwill of other pilgrims and albergue hosts. And so that's how we met, and then we ended up walking and bunking together for 3 weeks. It was amazing, and I don't think we had any idea that would happen. We paced, we walked at a similar speed, we were kind and respectful to one another. Amazing, beautiful, there you go. It was really good. And so these are also two friends that I met the very first day. And this is us in Pamplona, having some tapas. And these are the first two Tennesseans I have ever met outside of America. I've gone on a fair amount of trips, and I've gone with many a Tennessean, but I have never encountered another Tennessean. And I met two the first day right in line. And so from then on out, we walked together here and there. But we decided day one that if we were like, how are we going to call out to one another if we see the other person like way ahead? And so All Hail Dolly was what was agreed for our Tennessee cheer to one another. It was either that or Jack Daniels. So Dolly Parton, the same. But I bring up people right from the get-go because they happen right from the get-go. You walk with people and you find people and they find you. And similar to, I guess, the theme of that welcoming prayer, everything is so open-handed, or at least it was for me, and I think a lot of people come with that posture. And so people roll into your day and out of your day, and you walk into their lives, and then you maybe walk out again. And it's this, and sometimes you spend a long time together, but the way that, as people on the trail say, the Camino brings people to you. Side note, people, since you're all church folk, it's fascinating, people talk about the Camino as like a God euphemism like all the time. Maybe a lot of people will not talk about God and their direct relationship with God, but there is this true sense from atheists, agnostic, whatever, that like the Camino's magic. There's like real something there that is happening and acting all the time for people's good, and it's pretty cool. There's Martin and I again. Friendship. So additionally, one of the things that you get to experience when you're meeting people and you're sharing lives together, is food. But one of the questions I loved asking people was, what do you love most about your nation, where you come from? Tell me about where you're from and tell me what you love about it. And this is probably one of the most international things I've ever done. Meet people from everywhere, and it's just what an amazing resource to just talk to somebody from everywhere. And one of the things that people talk about in my journey was what our celebrations are, what the celebrations of our culture is, what we value, how we come together with our people and celebrate. And that was one way that we would talk about, one thing people were curious about when they would want to know about where you came from, etc. And so this is actually on Halloween. So I was walking with Benedict, and we were talking about, she was from France, and she was talking about traditions and celebrations, but we happened to be on Halloween, which some places practice in Europe, but it's not that big of a thing. So we had just climbed this big mountain. We walked into a little cafe, and this was our celebration. I just said, "Do you have any sweets here?" in Spanish, and they were like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Just give me one of everything. It's Halloween, for goodness sake." And they were like, "We have 4 sweet things, though." And I was like, "Yes, that's right." And so meager, but then also special, just getting to celebrate with different people and share life. Because most of the time it is around food or a table, if we're honest. I mean, you share a lot of life walking next to somebody on the Camino, but around the table, beautiful, wonderful thing. Here's another lovely moment. This was in a little village, and as we were walking along, I had this list of things I hoped would happen. And, I didn't have tons of like, I have to do any of these, but I really wanted to be in a pub watching El Clasico, which is Barcelona playing Madrid. And it's like really intense. And there was only one restaurant in town, and they didn't even have a television that day that it was happening. So I was walking around and not sure what. I was like, man, missed opportunity. But I came back, and Benny was rolling hand-rolled cigarettes and having some beers, and he on his phone was watching El Clasico. And he was the only Spanish person at this little albergue that we were at. And he was like, "Do you want to," in Spanish, he's like, "Do you want to watch?" Because I had been looking for it. I was like, "Yeah, of course." So, he was really, this was one of those beautiful moments where I speak some Spanish and he speaks like a little bit of English. But we're both real generous towards one another. We're like totally willing to just hang with it being pretty basic. And, lots of smiles and nods. And we watched the game and got into it and talked about politics a little bit. And it was great. It was great. That happens on the reg. But these are moments like this that just feel like so mundane, right? Just like having a pastry, just mundane, watching a game on your phone, but it's with a stranger in another country talking about international politics in another language, and you're just like, okay, this is great. Like this is beautiful. This is a gift. This is in Logroño, and this was a little albergue tucked onto the back of a cathedral, and a bunch of them are run by volunteers. So standing up there, this is a volunteer, and they had a crew of volunteers that would come and serve and kind of run the hostel, and this is us sharing a meal together, which is wonderful and beautiful. And he's right there, he's teaching us this song that's up behind him on the wall. And it's like the oldest song of the Camino, the Oltrea. It's this song about like onward, forward, unto heaven, roughly translated, but like following God, this sort of like really, really old song. He's teaching us, and we sang it together. And this was one of many of those moments where you're sitting around the table and people start talking about why they're there, what they're doing there, and meeting one another, and everybody's translating in different languages, and somebody is saying, I remember this one older gentleman from France who was just saying, like, I was so bored with life. Like, I'm retired and I just watch television all the time, and I'm so bored. And then he's like, and I was overweight, and I just started walking. I just didn't live that far from the Camino. I just started doing it, and then here he is, hundreds of miles later, and he feels alive again, and he remembers. He's lost a ton of weight, and he remembers what it's like to live in a different way than he was living. You have people losing their jobs and divorce, and you have people who are just getting out of college, all these different things, and they're telling their stories and what their hopes are, and all of those things that open up and just sort of bloom at the table every night when you come together. And it's so, again, just so grateful for those experiences, and such a rich part of what it means to walk on the Camino. This was in that same hostel that I was just showing. This was one of a pretty standard bunk room, maybe 24 in there. So this is sort of one of the downsides. There are downsides, of course. There are difficulties, and sleep in a room with 20 other people can be tough. Sometimes sleeping in a room with 6 other people can be tough. I'm kind of a light sleeper, and a lot of snoring, lots of loud sleepers, if you will. Lots of smells, lots of people being people around one another. And that's for good and ill, of course, as it always is. The beauty of getting to share a table with people and hear their stories, but also everybody just walked 20 miles that day, and their shoes are right there. And, they're hanging up their laundry right next to your head, and, many a thing. The sleep apnea machine. In fact, actually, one day, you start out, I'm thinking okay, I'm a light sleeper, but I've got to sleep, of course. So you start on centering yourself and trying to just be okay with the snoring, and just trying to calm yourself. Everything's fine. You've got earplugs in. You've got, all the stuff you can. This one night, and all that stuff's helpful. It's important. Just making peace with the situation, sort of taking the whole journey as it is anyway. There's a lot of that acceptance that you're working on through the process. This one night, it had been a long day, a rough day. And this Aussie was snoring so loud. I got a couple hours of sleep before this began, but I remember actually just pushing my fingers into my ears on top of my earplugs, as far as I dare push to not break my brain or my ear or whatever. How, we all know that level, this is as far as you can push, but push that far. And I could still hear loudly at that moment. I was there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do in this moment to fix how loud this is. So I went and I looked in every room in that albergue. There's 3 floors. Every room, is there a place I can put my bed? I'll take my mattress somewhere else. I'll sleep in a bathroom. I'll sleep in a washroom. What are we gonna do? The only place that there was room for a mattress was a hallway. I can't do that. So what I did do is I walked down to the kitchen, and just in my sleeping bag, I just laid down on the cold tile. And I thought, okay, I don't know if this is a good idea. And I don't know if I'm gonna sleep. And at this moment, I thought, okay, upstairs, it is soft and warm and loud. And down here, it's hard and cold and quiet. And which one is better? And 2 hours later, after I'd been asleep, I learned the answer for me, which was quiet. So because of that, learn something about yourself, of course. I ended up sleeping in kitchens here and there. And, you know, you start out looking at hostels and you walk in and you think, okay, is this like, they keep it clean in here? How are the bathrooms? Seem like we're gonna get hot water, and like, what are the beds like? And is there, you know, good rooms, whatever. And after that, I was like, okay, so yeah, is it clean, all that other stuff. Do they have like a living room with maybe a couch kind of far away from the other quarters? Maybe 2 of those even, with like carpet on the ground. Those were the ways I started to look at albergues after that night. But additionally, this is also just a grimace on Martin's face at the end of a long day. An additional thing is, it is hard on your body, of course. Maybe that goes without saying, but man, I almost put up pictures of my feet, but then I thought, nah, let's not do that. Let's not do that. Everybody knows what a blister is. Everybody's had bad blisters, but let me tell you, I had some bad ones. And I remember, it was like day 1 and 2. I was reading through my travel journal this morning. It was day 1 and 2 that I was like, ooh, got a pretty bad blister on that left pinky toe, wrapping 3/4 of the way around. This is concerning. What are we gonna do? And everybody's got a solution. Everybody's got what works for them, and you're open to it. You want to find something that works. You just don't know. Like you did your research. You made your best bets of what kind of gear you needed, and then here you are. Your body's breaking down. And I remember thinking, a few days in, this is probably 3 or 4 days in, you know, taking care of those blisters as good as possible. Now I have 4, now I have 8. And thinking like, how many layers of skin can I lose? Honestly, like the pain, I'm not a fan of the pain. The pain can be worked through, but like, I know 2 things. I know like on a Venn diagram, I know that this is breaking down my body, right? There's like, well, I don't know, that's the angle. It's breaking down my body this way, this is 0. But I know on the other way, my body heals. And I don't know which one's gonna win. Like I know that both these things are true, and I don't know how this is gonna play out for me this week, you know? And there really were a couple of days there where you're just rethinking everything. And you're just like, I don't know. I'm gonna have to throw these boots in the trash, and I'm gonna have to go get another pair of shoes, and I'm gonna have to break them in and see if they work, and you know, spiraling, just typical spiraling. That happens, but really, that moment that I think probably happens to everybody, where you're just like, this is more than I know. There's more going on here than I am in control of, which sometimes feels exciting, and this is not one of those times. This is one where I just feel like, I hope it works out. Well, it did. And I found some good medicines. If you're curious about that, I'm happy to tell you what my foot regimen was, but I'm gonna skip that for now. But everybody on the Camino talks about their feet, and everybody talks about their body, just like how you hold up. It's like, besides where did you come from today or where are you going, it's like, how you doing? You know, like, you whole today? You making it? Keep up the good work. But something that a lot of people said, and that I'd heard before, but had never been more true, is like, you gotta listen to your body. And not just like, no, bro, like you need to listen to like who you are. Not that. It's like, no, like this is important. Like, do pay attention. Your body is telling you things, and don't disrespect what it's telling you. There are consequences. So really pay attention. This was just in different albergues. So if you can't see that, it says, "The great artist is the simplifier," Vincent van Gogh. And that was written on one of the walls. And this is, you come to these different places in albergues and cafes where it's just sort of like a celebration of the Camino, with everybody writing something or putting their mark on, sort of saying, I'm here in some significant way. But I pick this one because it's a great quote, but also because this was really true for me, or this was true for my experience on the trip, that one of the things, spiritually speaking, personally speaking, what was the effect of the trip upon me was this sense of simplicity, this sense of quiet. Most of the time, you just have one job to do, or a couple very few jobs. You wake up, you pack your bag, you walk. You eat, you find a place to sleep, you wash your clothes, hang them up, set up your bed. That's the day. So in the midst of that, those are like the thing, early on, the internal pacing that I had of anxiety or whatever, it takes some time to kind of situate yourself on the Camino and what actually do I need to care about and not care about. But this revving, 12-cylinder engine of anxiety that's just like, it's not needed, It's like still revving in my mind, and I'm like, I don't need to stress out about that. I only have like X, Y, and Z to do today. That's it. And it was a practice to bring actually that fear and that anxiety back to reality, which was actually very beautiful and simple. And quiet, because most of the time you're just walking through the hills of Spain or the plains, and you maybe are talking to people, but the majority of the experience is just quiet. And some people ask me, so were you bored? And I can imagine people being bored, but I wasn't. I think that because of the posture of the prayer that I showed earlier, just this openness, there's a sincerity of paying attention to assuming that God was present and was working for my good, and that I was trying to pay attention to that in the midst of everything. But what I found was not a lot of like booming voices from God telling me a bunch of stuff, but actually like a lot of quiet. So I'm paying attention, and then I'm hearing silence, but I'm assuming that it's important. So I'm just intentionally quiet for a long time. Excuse me. And that was like washing for me. That was healing for me, to have a really deep experience that being still and quiet and simple is not just a lack of all the other good categories that we know, right? That not being productive, not being fast or smart or loud or convincing or whatever, to be quiet and your brain moves slower and you not get much done. I experience that as a really good thing. Like actually as a positive. It's more experiencing being instead of so much doing. Now, obviously you are doing something, you're walking, this very low level experience. But I think that that's actually extremely helpful. There's so many mornings that I woke up, if I'm honest, probably still most mornings I woke up and I thought, what the heck am I doing? What am I doing? So many mornings you don't feel good. So many mornings your body hurts or you're emotional or whatever, and you're like, what? So many times I'm like, what am I doing? What is this for? What am I getting out of this? What am I trying to prove? Am I trying to prove anything? What am I doing? And you find different answers to that, depending on who you are and where you're at. But what I always knew I was doing was walking, and that was very helpful. Because in the midst of that angst or frustration, I was like, well, figured out on the way, I guess. But I do know one thing I'm doing, that's walking. I'm going to Santiago. And if that means a bunch to me at the end, thank God. If it doesn't, I'm still going to Santiago. Like that's the deal. That's what I signed up for, that's what I'm doing. Anyway, that I think I could talk about for a long time. I think that's something that's one of the bigger takeaways is that's actually, that this experience is a voice in my mind now, right? It's a set of data that I have in moments of anxiety or in times of stress of one way or another, that this is a set of information that's meaningful to me, that's at the table now. This experience of peace and simplicity and really just this deep, deep knowledge that it is good to be alive. It's good to be alive. And that the world is beautiful, and that sunrises matter, and that birds are a real thing, that there are creatures that fly that we get to see and they sing songs to us. All these things that we take for granted, when we're quiet enough, then they sort of fill our imagination and they sink deep within us, and this abiding goodness of life and gratitude came back to me day after day after day. It's one of the things that I'm grateful for. I want to also, I'm going to cycle through, I don't know exactly how all of these were tied into the notes. Mostly, this is that gorgeous golden hour in the morning. Saw a lot of sunrises because we would wake up before the sun and walk under the stars for a little bit and then see the sunrise most days. And it's good for us. All right, I'm gonna shift to talk about some of the history and some of the context of pilgrimage for a bit, but I meant to say this at the beginning. There's no way that I can cover everything. That's obvious, but there's just no way that I can even say all the things that I consider important or worthwhile. So we are gonna have some Q&A after this, and if you guys want to run and scram, that's totally fine. But anybody that does want to continue to direct of your own desire where the conversation goes, I'm happy to still stick around and we'll do some Q&A. So if things are coming up, take note. All right, so this is apparently Santiago. I'm getting a look from Jacob. Okay. Jacob's been. Okay, but this is, so for those of you that are not familiar, just a broad overview of what this is, right? So early on in the church, the original place that the church would send people on pilgrimage would be to Jerusalem, right? That's the place that everybody went for a long time. You may have heard of the Crusades, which affected some things. So then that wasn't a route so much anymore, and then the second choice was to go to Rome, the seat there. And but because of the mountains and bandits, so many of them, apparently, that was not a great option either. And then around 900, they found this Roman era tomb in Spain, and it was in the northwest corner. And this is not debated. They found the sepulcher. And who it is, of course, is highly debated. However, this pilgrimage is based off of the assumption that it is the body of St. James the Greater. And so Camino de Santiago Compostela in Spain means the way of St. James, the field of stars, because it was a field of stars. Stars led people to find this tomb. So from the book of Acts, we know that, or it's documented, that James was beheaded in Jerusalem, and the legend goes that his body was put in an unmanned stone boat that was miraculously sent back to a place that he ministered as a missionary in the Iberian Peninsula and in that area, and that it made it up there. There's lots of other specifics there, but that's the main idea. And so, if you're thinking about your history, that's pre-Spain as a nation. That's pre-United Spain. So this is pretty early on. But the church started sending pilgrims here. This became the primary place that pilgrims went. And so there are routes from all over, primarily in France, that go to this place in Spain, the burial place. And this is pre-Spain as a United Kingdom, this is a big force for the attention of Europe and Christianity and paying attention to this area, and very much like the Knights Templar and different people that were involved in the Crusades, they moved over to support and protect pilgrims at this time. And this actually, tons of bridges were built and tons of things were established for the pilgrims, hospitals, all things like that, because this is one of the really significant forces that would end up contributing to the re-Christianization, politically speaking, of Spain. Because Spain, the Moorish people came up from Africa, Islamic Africans came up and ruled that area that we know as Spain in Portugal for 700 years. And so while that was the case, this pilgrimage began. It was really fascinating history that you learn and pick up along the way. There's one of those really great bridges that's so old and beautiful, and they're all over the place. Santiago. Okay, so this is a representation of Santiago, and right here we see him represented as a pilgrim, and this is very standard. You got the walking stick with the gourd full of water, old Nalgene kind of thing, and then you have his poncho, his floppy hat with a seashell, and this is you see this representation of Santiago all over the place, and it's I think I have a picture of it, but this is essentially like the symbol of the pilgrim, because this is what pilgrims would wear, leather or wool, for one part. The seashell, that I have my seashell out there, that's one of the primary symbols of the pilgrimage, and there's lots of reasons for that. I don't know which one is right or original, but definitely, a lot of the disciples were fishermen, and this is on the coast. But also, they're often used for baptisms or for drinking out of, like they're a vessel, right, to either baptize or to drink out of, both important in faith and pilgrimage. But they are, I actually think like a really beautiful symbol, and some of the renderings of the seashell are just gorgeous. Here's another one, looking like a goof. Look at that guy. Man. Anyway, I just threw it in there because it's worth a chuckle. But this was in a museum, and I guess his hat is made out of leaves or something. But anyway, that's the pilgrim representation. And, different places you see statues of like the pilgrim, like there's this one place, the pilgrim in a nativity scene, like bowing before Jesus, or there's one where Jesus in a church is actually dressed as a pilgrim himself. Anyway, it's all interesting stuff. And then this is also Santiago, and this gets at something that was an important complication in my mind, in my experience. So because of all those political forces, this is Santiago now as a warrior, and he is treading down the Moorish people there. He's the one who's killing them. And he becomes a symbol of conquest and of taking back this area and re-Christianizing it. And so he then is re-dubbed as Santiago Murmarte or something like that. Essentially, St. James who kills Moors. And so that's part of the tradition as well. And that's part of the way that that is also represented throughout. And that's complicated in my mind, going from a pilgrim to a warrior, and all in the name of Christ and having to do with faith. Complicated. There's the representation of Jesus with a little dog, just in a gorgeous little church. I actually like that place a lot. This is some graffiti. There is so much graffiti. This is like some, I guess, intentional or probably condoned graffiti. There's graffiti everywhere. But I took a picture of this to there are moments like this where you see people along the way that live there that are also processing this past of conquest and faith and power, and they are interacting with that in the midst of the Camino still being a force like cherished as a people on the whole and revered, but still having to deal with their own history. And right here, this is a little tile that has the three primary symbols, which is the seashell, the stars around it, and then this is actually the Camino cross, which is a red cross that is also a sword. And that the dual meaning really gets at the dual personalities also of St. James, to me, which is there are two stories of why that's the cross. And one is that St. James was martyred in Jerusalem, right? So that is, he was killed for his faith, following Jesus and being a missionary. And also because he killed the Moors, and because he became a champion for killing the non-Christian, non-Europeans. So even in that one symbol, it's like from being martyred, both at the same time the symbol is being martyred and martyring or murdering. And so again, history and all of it is, I'm sorry for being redundant. I wish I could say something more than it's complicated, but it's something, there's a dialogue there with how we walk through it and are faithful. And I guess that's always the case with tradition, right? This was actually, this is a photo that I did a painting off of behind me. But this was a place that we just stopped and had some bread. And it was a cool place there's no roof on this cathedral. But it actually spoke a lot to me as far as how I was interacting with the Camino and as it relates to tradition and faith, because the Camino would never exist without the power of the Catholic Church and without the power of this idea that a saint is buried here and to go to him will affect your life in some very, very meaningful way, whether that's forgiving all your sins or healing you or penance or whatever it is, some sort of idea to take pilgrimage. The Camino would never exist without that. And there are huge churches with tons of gold and all along the way, but often they're empty. And this one is, totally falling apart, and it's just a place that we had sandwiches, right? That hundreds of years ago, this is a place where like huge communities, where the most important things in that city happened, and huge communities came together and hopefully worshiped God and met God as a people. And so this, it felt like sort of when I imagine walking through like a dinosaur graveyard or something like that, like you're walking through something that used to be so powerful and is, you have the imprint of it, but, and you're there because of it, and it still speaks to you, but it's not the same. At a similar monastery, monastery ruin, this was like a little, just tucked away in a little nook, was this, was like a candle and some flowers and some notes and some rocks. And to me, that felt right, as far as the experience. That again, faith in those places feels really meager compared to what you imagine that it was, but so much better to have a small, meager faith in these places than none at all. And little spots like this, seeing this tiny little nook where people had written prayers, felt a lot like me praying in an empty church. There's lots of crosses. It's cool. There's so many along the way. If there aren't churches or shrines, there are. This is quite a modern one, just large and wooden. But there are crosses all along the way. And some crosses, like more modern ones, they develop more modern traditions as far as within the last 50 to 100 years, what are more the traditions that last, that people practice still today. And not this particular one, but one much like it, which I'm not sure I have a photo of. Bringing a stone is an important tradition. And that apparently is based off of the original building of the cathedral, where they needed stone, and so everybody brought stone to help build this cathedral. And so now the tradition is to bring a stone or a rock from your home country, and that symbolizes what you need to leave, what you need to let go of on the Camino, and then you leave it at the foot of the cross, and you move on. Yeah, that's it. This is actually the one, that particular one. That was early in the morning. Another example of more modern feel and tradition, that yellow symbol right there, that's the seashell symbol that I love. It's kind of like an arrow, kind of like a sunrise. It's a seashell. But the wayfinding is really good, which is one of the things I would encourage anybody that's thinking about doing it. I did the more popular way, which is the Camino Frances, and the wayfinding is so good. Whether it's like a stone arrow or a metal sign like this, or whether it's just yellow spray painted arrow on ground. Like there's so much of just saying, here's the way to go, which feels lovely to just, literally there were days that I was by myself and I didn't even have a map, and I was like, I don't know where to begin. And I'd be like, okay, go to the big church, and then look for an arrow, and it worked. Like that was good enough. And then along the way there's enough yellow, just look out. Even sort of becomes a game that there are lots of good apps that are very helpful, but I was like, I want to see if I can find them, So like a treasure hunt. Me and my friends are like to a place we're not sure in this little village. We're supposed to go right or left. And then I'll be like, there, up on the corner, there's a tile with a seashell and an arrow, and it's like, yes, okay. But just even in that, like you see generations of the culture of the Camino through things like wayfinding, which, and right here, a very transient culture, but so fun. Man, there's stickers, like a lot of sticker game on the Camino. Lots of writing messages, like this is the way. And it's so fun too, because most of the time it's very encouraging. People will like say a blessing or whatnot. I mean, sometimes, it's not, but It's always pretty interesting to see what people are riding on this. It's such a experience of humanity. This is just out of the book that I have right over there, but just to give you a sense of what kind of maps I had and was working with. And again, it's really great to disconnect from your phone and to go on an adventure. And there's lots of really good resources. This is Taco Bell, and just really for no other reason except in Spain they have Taco Bells, and I had to do it, and yeah, I'm glad I did. Cheesy chicken. This is the generosity of strangers, which is something that's really beautiful and different. I've been on different hikes in the United States and then also abroad a little bit. I remember going on a hike. It was like a 100-mile walk in Scotland. It's very similar in a lot of ways. There's good infrastructure, places to stay. And I stumbled upon it. I was just trying to find a place to hike, and it turned out that it was like a path, and I was like, great. But I remember like this sign on this restaurant that was like, walkers, stay outside. Do not take off your boots. Do not take off your jacket. Like, it was just like very itemized, like, we are so frustrated that you are here. You know? We're like, you guys are the worst. Like I just got the sense that like this establishment never ever intended that it would be on a walking path, and they was like, I resent this so much. But that is not the case. I would say in general, because there's such a long tradition of this, because so many people are genuinely on pilgrimage, their spirituality, their faith is a component of what they are doing, and there is something holy there on some level, that there is, I would say, in my experience, the most sort of reverence towards stinky walkers that I have perceived so far, because there is this history and there's honor in a lot of places, and sometimes just straight up kindness like this. Fresh grapes from like 20 feet away and home cooked stuff. Just Jack Daniels is everywhere. Just a little bit of Tennessee, landing, going ahead of you. This was one of the coolest things. So this is the side of a monastery, and that is a tap that wine comes out of. And they have hundreds and hundreds of gallons a day that they put aside. I believe it just started to be a support to pilgrims, but it's like one of the coolest things. Never had wine on a tap, never had it straight out the side of the monastery. It goes on and on. I was like, that's great, that's a must. This is right before I started, actually. This is all that I carried. Just reading a book. I think that's Grapes of Wrath. And then just that little backpack. And that's it. One of the things that's so nice about, for you as a traveler, as a hiker, because you are staying in albergues, you just don't have to have a tent. Some people want a tent because they want that option, but you don't have to have it, and you go through little villages all the time, so you don't have to bring food much either. So the lightest pack you can bring is totally accessible, and you pretty much wash your clothes every day, so you just need like 2 pair. And somebody, a friend told me actually later on that there's a saying on the Appalachian Trail, which is, your bag is as big as your fears. To sort of say like, and I was like, dang, yeah, that's right. Because I was trying to be packing for this trip. I wanted to be ultralight. I wanted to be so basic, because you're doing so many miles day after day after day, and just the toll it takes on your body. But then, and I felt like I did a really good job thinking through this and planning, but I'll tell you what, for me at least, it was like day 2 and day 1 before I left. I was like, maybe I also should grab, like it was like waves of just like, but also maybe I should, like so many, I could probably, it like hit me all at the end. But I was able to keep it at bay. But being able to have a small bag is such a gift, something that's so great for traveling in this capacity. This was just celebration. This was, there's a lot of rain. This is William and Martin and I, and that was 500 kilometers in. And they talk about kilometers all the time. They don't care about miles. That's dumb to them. And so this is, I think, 500 kilometers. And, I think that also something, we're always comparing, I think this is good. One of the reasons we have practices like this is we're trying to make tangible and make more real to us things that we already believe are real. There's all these things about life that we understand, but we want in sort of a symbolic fashion to practice tangibly. And that's one way to think about what spiritual practice is. And one of the things that's great is you have all these moments to celebrate, and we do this in our lives too. When you buy a house and graduate college and have a kid and get married, like all these things, we have these mile markers, and it's wonderful to do it on the Camino as well. Take your celebrations. Man, that's just a gorgeous church. This is in Burgos. And I think when I saw this, where we were staying was right next to it, and I just thought that is one of the most gorgeous things I've ever seen. One of the most gorgeous churches I ever saw. And those are the sorts of things. I think I just have it in here just to say, you go through amazing cities as well, and you get to go to really beautiful places. They're not all broken down. Some of them are very present and operational, and those spires. This is in Santiago. This is in the cathedral. You can see the hanging incense bowl there. This is kind of where you get to. And I remember, this is a little bit of if you turn, you can see the gold to the right there. If you turn around that corner, that's sort of, it's like, I don't know how many pounds of gold are there. There's these huge cherubim holding up this table. It's just Baroque as it can get. So much detail that is all golden. And again, just one of those moments where at least I want, I realize that I'm a Christian, I'm in the same tradition as this, but culturally really different, right? So the cultural experience of trying to find a way in to access worship in a place like this, I wanted to try, but it took a lot of effort, and it was sort of just something I just worked on the whole time. And I remember one of my first questions when I go into a place like that the aesthetic doesn't do anything. The high ceilings are amazing, for sure, but once you see 35 of them, you're like, yeah, that's good, another, but it's not the same aesthetic of maybe, I guess for me, simplicity or natural light that maybe speaks to me in a different way. But then I look at all this and I'm like, okay, I try to imagine what the purpose of all this is, what that has to do with God, what worshipers might be trying to do with all this gold and all this effort. And, for me, it's like, okay, a little bit, and I'm like, I think you're trying to say that God is very valuable, you're worthy of everything. How do we communicate the grandeur and the wonder of God with the resources we have? Let's do a ton of gold, let's do a ton of detail, let's do really, 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 really big rooms. And so those conversations, also in Spain, there's so many crucifixes, and way more violent than the ones that we see around here. Our stomachs are not for, there's a different level there. And I remember walking into one of those churches and just being like, Jesus, what do you think about this? Like, do you think that this, like, are you glad on the one hand that people are remembering you and remembering this important thing, but on the other hand, like, you think it's weird? Like, you think it's weird that all throughout the world and all over here, like, there's like all these places of like the worst and best, but also the worst, like, moment of your life. And what's that, but these moments, not that my thoughts are the best thoughts or answers or anything, but just these conversations, interacting with faith in that capacity, that was important to me in order to practice walking on the road like that. And this was a beautiful moment. This woman welcomed us into her. She was at this little chapel, and she was kind of yelling at us generously in Spanish, and telling us to come in. And she just had the many images of Mary on a string, and she just blessed us and talked to us for like 20 minutes. And I speak some Spanish, but not good enough. But from what I know, it was beautiful. And she just was blessing us and honoring us and talking about how much God was our Father, and that Mary was caring for us, and just again and again and again blessing. And again, it's one of those moments that's just like, this is the Camino. Like, this is being on the way, is experiencing a stranger that is here doing this. And I much prefer this to as far as like interacting with a stranger who is a faith leader in public. I much prefer this to like a fire and brimstone corner preacher. It's like this is the stranger interaction that I prefer when it comes to a stranger telling me who God is. Just more of Mary and Jesus. There's so many museums along the way. There we are. All right.